Oh, yes. Thanks, Harry. I'm glad you're on top of it. Can't rely on me all the time to get this stuff right. Um, so we're lucky enough to have the author, Bob Kodosky, here, and also the president of the Nile Swim Club, Anthony Patterson, is here as well. And so they'll be our two guests. That they're the experts on the topic. And Bob's going to go through a presentation for us, and then we're going to move into some conversation about the Nile as it is now, and then just general discussion and questions. So at this point, what I'm going to do is just turn it over to you, Bob, to lead us into the story of the Nile. Thanks so much for being here, both of you and Anthony.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rona. Thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone coming out. Just give me a second here to get this thing. There we go. So is it visible, Harry? Excellent. So greetings, everybody. My name is Bob Kodosky. I teach history at Westchester University. I've been there since 2002. And before that, taught high school in Philadelphia and did my graduate work at Villanova and at Temple. Um, I teach courses at Westchester University on diplomatic and military history and have done a lot on the Vietnam War. And so one question that you might have is, how do I get involved with a swim club? And if I go, it really leads back to the previous project. In 2020, had published this, worked with Mel Payne, who's seated on the left of the photograph, who's the director of the Philadelphia chapter of Tuskegee Airmen. Miss Alma Bailey is sitting next to him. Dr. Eugene Richards is sitting next to her, and I can't remember who else is there because the box is in the picture. But we're at the Union Leg in Philadelphia, and Mel had come to me and he was interested in doing a book project on the Tuskegee Airmen. And through that project, I learned the close connection that Philadelphia has to Tuskegee. We contributed more pilots to the organization than any city in the country except for Chicago. And in talking with Mel, what we wanted to make clear in this project was that World War II veterans, Black World War II veterans, including Tuskegee Airmen, had to fight for their right to fight for this country. And they did that to participate in a war against racism and fascism overseas. And when they came back, their war continued. And they waged it nobly and with great character and dignity. And as much as that part of the story sort of is not necessarily there in other accounts, neither is the fact that there were women in the unit. Miss Alma Bailey is testament to that. She was a nurse. There were nurses, parachute riggers, admins, and just the name itself, Tuskegee Airmen, leaves them out of this history. And we wanted to correct that. The first chapter is called Ladies First, and you can see that we put women on the cover. And as it turns out, Miss Alma Bailey lives in Yeadon, and I didn't really know that at the time, but she orchestrated a meeting with me and Mel and Anthony. And Anthony, you're going to hear from him later, and you'll hear a little bit about him in my presentation. An amazing guy, terrific individual, and the president of the Nile Swim Club. And, in the summer of 2022, I went down to Yeadon. I knew a little bit about Yeadon, not a lot, didn't know anything about the Nile Swim Club. We had a meeting. We talked about the history of the club. I was struck by the vibrancy of it. And we decided that we would do a book project focusing on the history. And with the Tuskegee book, what I didn't mention was that all the proceeds from that book go to a scholarship program that we set up in Philadelphia for high school students that fund nursing scholarships and engineering scholarships. And so with the Nile Swim Club book, which came out at the beginning of this year, all the proceeds go to the Nile Swim Club, and in particular, their efforts to make sure that all children know how to swim, which is incredibly important historically and today. And I'm a firm believer in connecting the past and the present. Um, so this project provided an opportunity to do that. And again, I'm a military and diplomatic historian. I wasn't particularly familiar with Yeadon or the Nile Swim Club. I'm a white guy and I can barely swim. And so I really tried to, as much as possible, get out of my own way and, let people tell the story and whatever role I could play in doing that. We met, Anthony and Mel and myself, in the summer of 2022. We conducted oral history interviews at the end of 2022 into 2023. And I had, I guess, about 5 weeks last summer to really sit down and write the book. And I was so motivated and captivated by the research that I did and the people that I spoke to and, the energy I got from the publisher. When I first pitched it to the publisher, they said, wow, that sounds like a really niche kind of a project. And I said, no, I think there's more to it. And so anyway, we got it done, and it very much privileges the people who made the history and who continue to make the history. Um, that is a photograph from the Nile, some of the lifeguards there and some of the people enjoying the pool, which this year is celebrating its 65th year in existence, which is just absolutely a wonderful thing. And it is doing very, very well. The Nile, so many people had, in speaking to me, said, it's a place where you can be yourself. And that doesn't, matter who you are, you can come here and you can be yourself. And for a lot of people, it's important that they're able to see themselves doing things, whether it's running the pool or serving as guards or others, because today in the United States, the number is, I've seen sort of different numbers, but the number that seems to be the most common is 65% of African Americans do not know how to swim. And drowning rates, according to the CDC, are far higher among Black children than they are amongst any other group. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One of the driving reasons, though, has to do with the historical inequities around swimming. It's estimated that when people were brought to this country as slaves, somewhere around 80% of them knew how to swim. That shouldn't really be surprising. Coming from Africa, we know some of the earliest depictions we have of people swimming are hieroglyphics, and we know that people were swimming in Africa. What happened? Well, if you think about history broadly over the course of time, because of disease and all the rest, white people weren't swimming. So consequently, think about it. People are bringing African Americans to this country as slaves, as property, and they are going to do whatever they can to keep those slaves out of the water because the slaves will swim away. And the white people don't know how to swim. And I can't overstate this. I found in the course of doing the research, there was a report that came out of Annapolis in the 1890s. Many of the sailors were white in the United States Navy at the end of the 19th century, and they didn't know how to swim. And the Navy was basically, calling on the service to make sure that sailors learned how to swim. So you've got this longer history that certainly the Nile Swim Club is part of. I have this here because I found this lithograph, I guess it is, where where slaves were encouraged to swim, were in activities where white people wouldn't get in the water. And so you have this pearl fishery that is pictured here. So you have the long history. Swimming became a recreational activity end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th in the United States. Cities in the Northeast began to create bathhouses. Bathhouses were places, Philadelphia built its first bathhouse in 1883. And the idea was for basically people to go there and get clean. It was a hygienic sort of a thing. It happened during that time period because of the new immigrants that were coming into the United States from Eastern Europe, from Southern Europe, and they were perceived as being dirty, unhygienic, living in tenement houses. And so they built these bathhouses. And what you might notice about that photograph is at the time, bathing publicly was segregated by gender, not by race. I had a conversation with a few people in the Niles community that remember as children Philadelphia pools being segregated by gender. So there were days that women could go, there were days that men could go, but race wasn't a factor. At the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, because it was black men and white men, white women and black women, not an issue. That starts to change for a few reasons at the beginning of the 20th century. One of the reasons is some of you are probably familiar with what we call the Great Migration. World War I precipitated a great movement of Black people from the Jim Crow South to the North. And in that movement, it, fostered many, they say de jure and de facto. In other words, segregation by law down South. In the North, sort of put in place where you have North Philadelphia becoming a Black community, and you have white flight beginning during this time period. Well, the Great Migration, the development of the automobile, where now people were driving recreationally, and in the North, and in particular, in a place like Atlantic City, which had been racially integrated for a long time, began to racially segregate. And, when I was doing this, I'm not originally I live in Westchester now, and I've been in Philadelphia since 1989, but I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I'm not familiar with sort of the Jersey Shore culture that exists around here. And I was talking to people, they were telling me about a place called Chicken Bone Beach. Chicken Bone Beach was in Atlantic City, Missouri Avenue, the beach. And fundamentally, as Atlantic City was trying to position itself into a resort town, the beaches became segregated. And while whites could go to the Black part of Atlantic City to see Black entertainers, Black people could not go to Atlantic City outside of those confines of what became known as Chicken Bone Beach. And it was explained to me that African Americans going to the beach would take chicken because chicken held up well in the heat. They couldn't eat in a lot of the establishments in Atlantic City. They were white only. And they would end up leaving chicken bones on the beach. And so it gets this name, Chicken Bone Beach. If you're not familiar with the 1920s, it was a very nativist time. There was eugenics movement. There was an anti-immigration movement. There was this notion of racial purity that takes hold. And so you start to have these segregated swimming places that are different than what had happened before. I have here, again, sort of in doing the work on this book, This is a board of trustees notes of a meeting that was held at the school that I teach. At the time, it wasn't Westchester University. I think it was just, it might have been Westchester Normal School. I want to say the year was in 1936. And you can see here that they are talking about a serious problem. And the serious problem is that they have a colored student, and it's a colored girl. And at no point in this do they ever mention this young lady by name. But she constitutes a problem because she's in the education track. And to become an educator at that time, you needed to know how to swim. The YMCA in Westchester had a contract with the college. Like other YMCAs, it would not permit Black people to swim. And so the YMCA is saying, you can't send this girl over here. And what you see here is they're talking about this one pool that they have. And what it means is, first of all, it's only 4 feet. And if she gets into it, because it's 30,000 gallons, every time she gets into it, they have to drain the pool and refill it. Because by this point, around all of that stuff in the 1920s, there are perceptions about Black people contaminating the water somehow. This is a book club. If you read Cast and you saw the cinematic version of that, Origin, there is an awful. It's difficult to sit through scene in that film that involves a swimming pool in the 1950s. So this is the situation in Westchester in the 1930s, and what they basically come to a conclusion is that after this colored girl, there's going to be another colored girl. So we need to write Harrisburg basically saying we need to keep colored girls from entering this course, right? So in Westchester during this time, again, from outside research, the custom was if a Black person went to a restaurant in Westchester, if they ordered a banana sundae, they would be served. But rather than receiving it in a glass container that was given to a white person, they would get a paper container. So many of these things reinforcing this notion that Black people were somehow contaminating things. And that's very much part of this swimming story. Yeadon, this is the photographs are recent, maybe last year I took those. Right on, Anthony can later correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're on Union Avenue going right into the pool. Yeadon became one of the earliest Black suburbs in the United States. You see the line here. This is what's called West Yeadon. And during the Great Depression, there were a number of these houses that became available, and Black families began to move in and establish a community here. The white part of Yeadon on the other side of Church Lane here, the high school somewhere in the middle. The high school was integrated. Black students and white students went to school together, but literally at the end of the day, they went out separate doors. The whites went to their side of town and the Blacks went to their side of town. And strict racial segregation was enforced outside of school. So there were places that people talked to me that, you know, they would go to school and they would talk with their white friends, but they weren't welcome, you know, in restaurants or movie theaters or things like that. Here, because there was more land to develop, this is an advertisement that ran in the Philadelphia Tribune for new houses in West Yeadon that were being sold in the 1940s. And those houses went for the price of $2,900. You could buy one with $290 down, of course, which was a lot of money back then. But you have this developing Black community that includes a number of professionals, but others as well, very civic-minded. Many had come from the South and encountered segregation in Philadelphia and were looking for a place to raise their kids, sort of, you know, the American dream kind of thing. A number of famous people ended up living there. This is William Hastie. who became the first African American appointed to an appellate court in the United States. Truman appointed him to that. John F. Kennedy considered him to be a Supreme Court justice. And he also, before he resigned, served as an advisor to the War Department during the Second World War. And the Second World War, African Americans, as they have throughout American history, raised their hands to do what they could do with the underlying promise that after this, it's going to be different next time. Service should equate to first-class citizenship. I mean, over and over and over and over, from the Revolutionary War through the Second World War, that was what the promise was, and it was never, ever delivered on. So during the Second World War, the Pittsburgh Courier, which at the time was the widest distributed African-American paper in the country, called for a double V campaign, double victory. This time we're going to contribute to victory overseas, and we're going to achieve a victory at home. And again, World War II against racism and fascism overseas, while people serving in uniform are experiencing those things in their own country. Units like Tuskegee, but also the Red Ball Express, the Black Panthers, the Tank Battalion, all served during the Second World War. And when these guys come home, many of them learned how to swim in the military. When they want their kids to learn how to swim. They find out that that's going to be more of a challenge than they anticipated. To amplify this is a photograph of Littleton Mitchell. Littleton Mitchell started his degree at Westchester prior to the onset of the Second World War. After Pearl Harbor, he volunteered, ended up in the military, became a Tuskegee Airman, did a lot of great things, came back to Westchester to finish his degree. When he came back to finish his degree in education, they took him to that same little pool that they showed that little girl 10 years before, and they said, this is where you're going to learn how to swim. And as a World War II veteran, he said, I ain't going to do that. More meetings ensued. He ended up getting a degree from Westchester, but the solution in his case was to put him on a bus and send him to Temple University, where he learned how to swim there. So World War II in and of itself didn't solve any issues. Swimming starts to become a project that's tied up into racial desegregation, like the public schools. And so you have here Mamie Livingston in Baltimore. Baltimore at the time had 8 public swimming pools. And those 8 public swimming pools throughout the city of Baltimore, 7 of them were for whites, 1 of them was for blacks. And the only one that was chemically treated was the one that was for blacks. Well, you see her, she can't get into the pool as a kid in the neighborhood she lives in. The NAACP got involved. They sued, and Baltimore desegregated its swimming pools in the 1950s. What happened next? White attendance at those swimming pools dropped by like 80%. Flat out, white people just stopped going to the swimming pools and started to create private swimming pools. And that becomes the model across the nation. As the government is saying public pools have to be integrated, private swimming pools come into existence where they could discriminate. So this is a photograph from Cairo, Illinois, when African Americans in Cairo, Illinois wanted to utilize the local public swimming pool. You see the white population there basically made up a sign, private members only, and denied membership. Protesters got involved. The governor of Illinois said this is not acceptable. The community in Cairo, Illinois, the white community, ended up filling in their public pool, that pool, with concrete. And as far as I can tell, Cairo, Illinois still does not have a swimming pool. This is a photograph from St. Augustine, Florida, where they were trying to integrate the beaches down there. And as part of that process, some white activists asked their black colleagues to join them at the motel and to get into the swimming pool in the motel. You can see the motel owner dumping muric acid into the swimming pool. This occurred in the summer of 1964, and it made some degree of impact on Congress's decision ultimately to pass the civil rights legislation in 1964 because it drew a lot of attention and pretty horrifying stuff. Back to Yeadon. You're looking there from left to right at Carson Purifoy and Zoe Mask and Elmer Stewart. And they and others in West Yeadon were trying to join the Yeadon Swim Club. And the Yeadon Swim Club lost their applications. They needed to refile their applications. At one point, I think it was Mr. Stewart left, came back, forgot he had, didn't fill out something on the application, and the application was in the trash bucket. Within the context of everything else that's going on around the country, they start having conversations. What should we do? We first and foremost, many had served in World War II. The men had learned how to swim. They wanted their kids to learn how to swim. Well, Zomask said, you know what? You guys need to stop talking. Let's just build our own pool and let's call it the Nile. And that became what happened. They reached out into really communities, Philadelphia, in Yeadon, but also Chester County, into New Jersey, to sell ownership into this pool. And Mr. Purifoy's certificate is here. $250 in 1957 to buy ownership into this wild idea of a black owned and run swimming pool. And $250 in 1957 would be like $3,000 today. And they raised the money. And you can see the photograph here of the groundbreaking, and then the opening on July 11th, 1959. And from day one, the Nile Swim Club opened as a fully integrated, inclusive space. The Nile said, we don't care what color you are. We don't care what ethnicity you are. We don't care what religion you are. You're welcome here. In 1959, it's mind-boggling when the other swimming club in town, of course, had a very different point of view. It prospered. I love this photograph. Probably late 1960s, early 1970s. Can't remember the exact date, but just people out enjoying the weather, enjoying the summer. The place became a community hub, a cultural hub. It became nationally renowned. You see the Supremes, Jesse Owens. I mean, this, sort of continued. Jet Magazine, Ebony was writing about the Nile. Yeadon started to become referenced as the Black Main Line. And just all kinds of programming for children, for the community. People described it as a safe space, one big family, just this amazing kind of a place. What happened? Well, not only in Yeadon, but in nearby places. Whoops, I'm sorry. People started to challenge the racial sort of segregation that existed in these towns. This is in Fulcroft, Pennsylvania. And that photograph is a day after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech. The bakers tried to move into full craft, and this is what met them. And, it's just stunning to me that, these kids, and you can see the hatred in their eyes. And this began to happen also in Yeadon, where at one point, because realtors were playing on white fears of Black people moving onto the block and, the real estate value going down, Yeadon Borough actually tried to pass an ordinance that prevented people from selling their houses because it was just absolute craziness. We're lucky to have sort of really two forewords in this book. One of them, Anthony wrote, who is here and is the president of the NILE, and we'll talk about it a little bit. The other, Lamont Farrell, who is pictured here with his family. Lamont is on the far right, and his family moved into Yeadon in the 1970s. And the book chronicles the story of this changing Yeadon, where you now have Black families moving into white communities, and that the Ku Klux Klan ended up there, and it became a really, really dark time. All of that had its impact on the Nile, which, after having so much success in the 1960s and 1970s, began to go into a difficult time. The Nile Swim Club went into bankruptcy on three occasions and came really close to not being in existence. Membership went down. There are a lot of reasons why that happened, but the club began to struggle, and it puzzled people because as Yeadon's population was becoming increasingly African American, the swim club was not doing as well, but it marked sort of this potential of losing this history, but also the community space that it had been for so long. That's Anthony pictured there, and his brother Sam with the Eagles jersey on. I know I'm not supposed to say Eagles today at this point, but I'm sorry about that. He's wearing a jersey. Anthony grew up right across from the Nile. He can tell you about that. Anthony's father was an AME minister, Reverend Isaac Patterson, and Anthony is the youngest of 19 children to his mother and father. Anthony's father passed away when Anthony was young. Anthony's father was a revered and respected person in Yeadon's community. Anthony's mom, to keep her family together, went to school, got a job at Mercy Fitzgerald Hospital as a nurse. The kids all kicked in, and the community at the Nile said to little Anthony, you know what, you want to come in here? Come on in. We'll teach you how to swim, and we'll give you lunch every day, hamburgers, whatever. Anthony did that, grew up, went to Cheney, had a career, moved not far away, but was looking for a place. Remember, Anthony is the youngest of 19 children. So family get-togethers are really, quite the occasion. He was looking for a place to have a family get-together, and it took him back to the Nile. And he found a lot of people doing everything that they possibly could to keep the place afloat, but it needed some help. Anthony brother Sam and some of Sam's friends have had a lot of success in the business world, and they agreed. There was no way they were going to let the Nile go away. Not only did they raise the money, but they went to work. They got volunteers to do the work. They made a lot of programming adjustments to really sort of bring the Nile in tune with the community. Everything in terms of, you see a sustainable garden there, basketball clinic, all kinds of activities for elders, for youth. and turned the place around in a remarkably short period of time with some help from some of the other first generation people that came back. And you see here, the Nile Swim Club was recognized with a historical marker. Pictured here, if you remember in the groundbreaking ceremony, there was a little girl. That's her today. Her name is Denise. And Denise is Elmer Stewart's daughter. Elmer Stewart was the first vice president of the Nile Swim Club. And you see there with the family. So it very much is a family community place, remains integrated, remains very welcoming, and doing all kinds of great things. And if you're interested certainly in the book, I hope you buy the book. If I'm around, I'm always happy to sell. I'm happy to sign it for you. I'm sure Anthony will do the same. There is a website called Picturing Black History. You can just Google that. I wrote an article for them that published that includes the Nile and some of what I just talked about. And at Westchester University this fall, we have a group of students who are building a website that is complementing the book. We did oral histories with Anthony and some of the other members, and we have a partnership with the University of Kentucky. And by the end of the year, that thing is going to be running. And so if you have stories about, swimming history, please reach out to me. Would be happy to include them. And I think I'm talked out, Rona. I think I'm done.
Okay, thank you so much, Bob, for that. And the history was amazing. And I think those of you who read the book were familiar with some of what Bob covered in this. And although it's specific to Yeadon in the book, it also was happening in Lansdowne and also with the Lansdowne Swim Club as well. For those of you who lived in Lansdowne or near Lansdowne at the time, you might be familiar with what was going on with that real time. I want to give Anthony a chance to talk a little bit about what's happening at the Nile now, because we've heard the history of what was going on when it first started and why it first started, but it's thriving now and doing extremely well, and an excellent part of the community. I just would like to give Anthony a chance to talk about some of the things that are going on there, and then we'll have some time for some questions and conversation that I think that Bob and Anthony will both be open to any questions that you all may have. So Anthony, I'll turn it over to you for anything that you
Yes,
might want
thank
to
you
add.
so much for having us this evening. We truly greatly appreciate that. So yeah, so as Bob stated, I joined the NILE board about 6 years ago or so, and we had approximately 75 members. Excuse me, I'm sorry. To date, we now have over 2,000 members. So the pool is doing very, very well at this time. We've created, as Bob said, a bunch of very, very good programs for our senior optimal wellness, water aerobics. We have a Nile swim team. We're developing a dive team, youth basketball, the Nile Tennis Academy, the Nile Garden. So, and as Bob said, the pool is always inclusive. Everyone is always welcome to the pool. And one of our signature programs is our No Child Will Drown in Our Town, where basically we provide free swimming lessons to young adults, to children and adults. As Bob stated, there is 64% of young African American children have little to no swimming capability. And we teach hundreds of kids every summer and adults all summer long on how to swim for free. And again, you can go to our website at nileswimclub.org to help fund any of those programs. And again, thank you so much for having us. And we are open to any questions you may have.
Yeah, and Anthony is the current president of the swim club, and just have to say it, just very proud of the work that he's doing and keeping things going and keeping everything active. I'm a little biased. Anthony's my brother-in-law. It's great to see him being recognized also for a lot of the great things that he's doing. And I do think that there are some NILE Swim Club members that might even have joined us
Yes, a
tonight.
couple, looks
Anthony,
like
did
it's one of
you?
our board members and now members are on.
Okay.
Denise Swan is on. Her father is one of our founders. Sister Cheryl Bailey. Latifa Fields is one of our NILE members as well. And my wife Lori is also on.
Yeah, I think I know Lord.
Right?
Um, so it's great to have all of you here with us tonight, and just really happy with the work that you've been doing and keeping everything going. And I don't know if there's some things that those of you who are hearing about the Nile for the first time found interesting or new as you were reading the book and or hearing Bob's presentation tonight. Anything that really struck you or any thoughts that you have after our discussion our conversation so far that you might want to have any questions or comments.
The session is being recorded. Let me know if anyone is uncomfortable and would prefer not to be recorded. I'll turn it off.
Yes, there are some people who couldn't join us tonight that really wanted to be here and had asked if we could record it. But if anyone is here that would like Harry to turn off the recording, please let us know now that you'd like to have the recording stopped. And also, Harry asked me to let you know that once you joined, you were automatically muted. So make sure if you have any questions or comments, unmute yourself so we can hear you. And we'd love to hear anything that you have to say. Anybody have any comments? Any thoughts?
Rona, I grew up in Lansdowne and I knew of the Nile, had never gave it much thought as a teenager. My best friend's father was a teacher at Yeadon High School. And I wish now that I could, ask all these questions of him. And also, as a teenager, I read about how much racism was still going on. And this would have been in the early 60s. I went to Don's, which they mentioned. I think was it on Church Lane and then they were saying how only the white teenagers went to Don's. Well, I never knew that because I didn't understand that all this was happening.
Yeah.
May I, and one of the things, and because we've done a few of these talks and some people who grew up in that area, one of the comments that I've gotten, particularly from white people who grew up in the area, was they were some didn't even know that there was a Black community in West Yeadon. And some of that had to do with not the high school system, but the Catholic school system, which, it was possible to be really sort of completely distant from West Yeadon. And so people would tell me that, they didn't really encounter people of color until they went to St. Joe's Prep or something, in the city. So it's a very common observation, I think, that you're making, that I've heard anyway.
Yeah. And people may not realize the swim club history at that time, in Lansdowne or Yeadon, but certainly they may have been affected or heard about the housing situation or even the situation in the church and even how our own church was affected during that time period by segregation, in the area. And yeah, a lot of people who some of the folks that are on the call now may have some experience as well that might want to share. I think I was particularly struck by the CDC numbers that you included in the book, Bob, about the drowning rate of Blacks exceeding whites during the time period. I think the time period you included in the book was 1999 to 2019,
Right.
that time frame, and having that lead to the slogan that I think Anthony that you might have started, the "No Child Will Drown in Our Town." And the need to make sure that all kids could be able to swim. So
Absolutely.
Yes,
I
I
thought that
think
was
that was,
very important.
yeah.
So the board and I got together, and when we were hearing those types of numbers, said we have to do something about this. So we put together a program where basically we open the pool at 9 a.m. and we're teaching kids how to swim up until 12. And then we have classes in the evenings as well. And we just felt that we have to do something about that number. And I think it basically stems from lack of access is the greatest thing that was the biggest one of the greatest concerns. And then also you have like your pools in like Philadelphia and other areas where you really don't have any programs going on at a lot of those pools. They're just making sure that no one drowns and no one gets hurt. They really don't have programs. Like we put together all these programs that I think are very, very important in all of our communities, just to make sure we provide a place for our children to go. That's a very safe space. And I tell everyone, once you get inside these gates and on our 4.5 acres of land, it's a very safe space to be in for everyone, for everyone.
And I know you've had this program for year after year, and I'm assuming each year you're having more and more kids that are coming and participating in the programs. Are adults also included in those classes as well? Are they able to participate? Or is it just the kids?
No. No, we also have adult swim lessons as well. So basically, we teach the kids in the morning and we teach the adults in the evenings and on the
Okay.
weekends. So
Okay.
those can come Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings, and learn how to swim. And we have I don't know how many lifeguards. We have over a dozen, and we have about 6 or 7 of them that are certified trainers to teach adults and children how to swim. And we have like a 98% success rate. The children start out in 3 feet of water, then they go to 4 feet, 5 feet, and at the end of our 10-day session, they're jumping in off of a diving board into 11 feet of water and swimming across the pool in 10 days. We have the greatest success rate, I think, I don't know of any other programs. We have several parents who come to our pool who said they've taken their kids to the YMCA's, Philadelphia schools, all these different places, and for whatever reason, their kids are not learning how to swim. And we have testimony from different parents that say they bring their kids to our program, and within 10 days, they're jumping in 11 feet of water and swimming to safety.
And Rona, as just sort of an observer of this, Anthony is absolutely right, that feeling of safety and community. But if I had to guess, I think what they're getting at the Nile is just joy. I think this is like the happiest place on earth. Anytime I'm at the Nile, everyone's smiling, everyone, between the snack bar, the garden, the basket. I mean, there's just so much going on, and there's just those kids. It's just pure joy for them to be in the water and to be
Right.
supported by adults. I mean, it's really a remarkable place.
And I
And
think
that
it
test
really,
I'm sorry, that's just a testimony to the culture that Anthony and the others, including the board members here and over generations, have really built and worked really hard to preserve that. It's not so much the hole in the ground that's important. It's the people, right? And that community that exists in that space. And it's amazing. It really is.
We're more than a swim club.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think you're right about the community and the community feeling and community spirit that's there. I think even in the book, just highlighting the mentoring aspect that was there for the young people who were there, uh, and the adults who were in charge at the time, going back, early in the history of the swim club, it just seemed like that mentoring aspect was there, and it seems like it's still there, and leading by example there.
Absolutely.
Certainly.
And it's very diverse. I mean, our membership is extremely diverse with over 2,000 members, but we have a very diverse membership of different races, different backgrounds, different ages. I mean, you'd be really surprised that, the diversity of our swim club.
And I think that's super important. I'm glad that you were talking about that as well, Anthony, because that's not how this whole story started, how
Correct.
the swim club even began, because of this need to segregate and the need to be exclusive. And the fact that there's inclusivity now is just so special and so important. So
Exactly. And I'm so very proud of our founders for the simple fact that they could have very simply protested and fought and probably forced the Yeadon Swim Club to integrate or the Lansdowne swim clubs to integrate. And, they could have, we could have picketed and all that good stuff like, they did in the 60s and all that stuff. But instead of doing that, they came back to our community and said, listen, let's build our own pool and we'll welcome everyone to that pool. And I think that is why myself and our board members work so extremely hard to ensure that this pool will be here for a very long time. And I mean, it's sad to say that the Yeadon Swim Club that pretty much did that to us is now closed and shuttered. Um, I don't, I'm sad, sorry to hear that happen, but that
Not
pool is no
really.
longer in existence, for numerous reasons. And but the NILE Swim Club remains to be open. It's been open for 65 years. And and in the book, and as Dr. Kodosky stated, we've had our struggles. We went through some bankruptcies and folks had, sheriff sales on the door and all that good stuff. But we worked our way through it. We fought our way through it. And now we're, like I said, in excess of 2,000 members and no issues at all financially with the NILE Swim Club.
Well, and that's what families do, Anthony.
Right.
Families have troubled times and they
Absolutely.
persevere. And that's
Well, yeah, I mean, and I tell everyone this story. I mean, back to even when myself growing up, the youngest of 19 children. And, when my father died when I was 3 years old, there's like 13 or 14 of us still at home, and, Department of, Social Services knocking on our door talking about how's this, 45, because as you know, my mother got pregnant at age 16 with my oldest brother and remained pregnant for the next 25 years. So from age 16 to 42, she had 19 children. So when my father died in 1966, they basically came to us saying, "Hey, I don't think you, as a high school dropout, how are you going to take care of all these children? I think we should split you guys up, send one or two here, two or three here." And my mother said, "Under no condition is that happening," and said, "No, we got this." And she basically went back to school, got her GED and nursing certificate, and then basically raised us and, put some of us through college and worked extremely hard. So when I got to the NILE Swim Club 6 years ago or so, and I saw a similar situation where the sheriff was knocking on our door, I said, no, beat it. We're not having that. We'll find a way to pay off these taxes and find a way to rebuild this pool. And I think that's where a lot of folks on our board and myself included is where the drive comes from. When you come from a family of my size and, and the hardships and ups and downs that we had as a family, you find a way to work through it and you find a way to make sure that you stick together and fight through the troubled times. And that is what we've done at the NILE Swim Club.
And I see in the chat, Denise Swan has written families continue on at the NILE for 4 to 5 generations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, it's generational. I mean, her family, her children, her grandchildren are all there. The Hall family, I could rattle off families that have been there for 4 and 5 generations that bring their children there. They're teaching their grandchildren and great grandchildren how to swim now, continue to pay their dues. Even, Denise lives in Maryland and she still pays her dues and comes maybe once or twice a year. It's just very supportive. We have a very, very supportive membership and community, and it's very diverse.
Cheryl, did you have something you were going to say earlier or no?
Yeah, I just thought when Robert said it was one of the happiest places on earth, it really became that this summer. I was a member to NILE when I was about, I don't know, 5. I lived in Yeadon from 1962. I wasn't a member every summer, but I certainly have come back for the last 4 years. And when he said the happiest place on earth, many hours I spent this summer were in Zumba, Aqua Zumba. Classes at 12 o'clock and classes at 7 o'clock.
Yes, our water aerobics classes. I mean, our teachers we hire some of the greatest instructors. A lot of our aquatics director and all our lifeguards. I mean, love working for the pool. A lot of them came out of the Philadelphia swim club system. And again, like, don't get me wrong, I love Philadelphia. I live in Philadelphia, but those swim clubs are a little bit different than ours. So all our instructors, our lifeguards, our maintenance staff, our front desk staff, all enjoy working at the NILE Swim Club all summer long. They get upset when we close in the spring, for the once we close after Labor Day. But we continue to have our Eagle tailgate parties there. We do a host of stuff at the pool pretty much, from Labor Day, well, from Memorial Day through, September, October, we're having Eagle tailgates, and you're all more than welcome to attend.
Sounds like there's an invitation out there for everybody.
Absolutely. Bring you guys and come to the pool next summer. I'd love to have.
Go.
Rona?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this was covered, but how did the club acquire the land? I mean, that's because it's 4.5 acres, right? Was it there? Was it bought from?
Basically, it was basically a giant, just a field of trees and, just a giant field. So they basically it's 3 parcels of land. So they bought the first parcel, which is where the pool is. I don't know if Dr. Kodosky has a aerial shot, but so we bought the first parcel, which was the pool in the pool area. And then we bought the second parcel later on, and then we bought the third parcel, which is off of Providence Road, where the tennis courts and baby pools are. So basically, we started with the first parcel with the members paying that $250, buying the first parcel of land, and then through the 60s and 70s, as our membership was solid, we bought more land and put a baby pool in. Then we put the tennis courts in. Then we put the basketball court in. We recently had the basketball court redone by Jeff Brown. He heard our story, and he saw it, I think, in the Tribune or in the Inquirer, and reached out to me and said what we can do to help. And Jeff Brown from the Shop Rates in Philadelphia said, here, how about if we donate a new basketball court? So we had a new basketball court installed a few years ago. We're working on getting our new tennis courts updated. We're looking at expanding our garden. We're working on a culinary. We're teaching the kids how to garden. And, we have all kinds of great vegetables over there. You can come over there anytime and get tomatoes and peppers and collard greens and all kinds of stuff is growing over there. We just did our fall harvest, and now we're about to pretty much harvest all that stuff as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Anything that anybody found surprising when you were reading the book?
I would just like to say I've lived in Lansdowne since 1969. I worked in Yeadon for 18 years, and I knew Denise Swan as Denise Byers, a math teacher at the high school. I had no idea the history she had with Yeadon. I knew her 2 kids because they went through Penwood East, where I worked, which is now the 9th grade academy. And she's quite a lady. She has risen above everything they talked about in caste, and she did so much for all the kids that went through Penwood High School that had her. And I'm familiar with the name of Jacqueline Purefoy Brinkley, and I'm familiar with Anthony Patterson through my association with Rona, and I thank you for everything that you have done for that community.
Thank you.
Continue to do. And I still use Yeadon's library, even though I live in Lansdowne, and so I go by the NILE Swim Club several times a week.
Oh, very nice. Yes. And Denise was also my math teacher, by the way.
I was surprised. I'm originally from New York, and fortunately enough, my father I just recently found out, was part of the Tuskegee Airmen. And at the time, he was an attorney, and I was privileged in my education so that I did not feel that separation going to swim. I didn't have that. To read it in the book was so upsetting. I had absolutely no idea. And I want to congratulate you and the swim club and the members for doing the utmost for children. Thank you.
Right. And any other comments, any questions?
I would invite anybody to come to some of our classes next summer. They're a lot of fun.
I think also, Bob was talking about the website that he has, and also Anthony was talking about the NILE's websites for finding out more information and more opportunities there. So like the ones that Cheryl's talking about now, finding out some of the different things that are going on by looking at the website.
Yeah, and because you had mentioned Lansdowne, and because Lisa Ivory, who I don't think is here tonight, who's the vice president, was one of the ones involved with some of the difficulties around the Lansdowne Swim Club. And just this morning, by coincidence, I got a student who's doing some research into all of that. She has some history down there too. So, we're going to build out some of that history.
Also, if you know of anyone who has any organizations or individuals who might feel so inclined to do donations, I think that's also available on the website. I don't think Anthony and his other board members are going to turn any of that away, those opportunities away. So feel free to take a look. Oh, I see that Anthony dropped the link in there. Should you need that, be able to get to the website. I think this was a really excellent topic for us to talk about. It not only included information in a book that our book club could discuss, but also, as I mentioned at the beginning, topics of dealing with social injustice and racism, and for our church being an anti-racism based church and having these conversations. I think it was a really important one, and so excited to have had Bob and Anthony join us tonight. Before we let them go, one last opportunity for anything else to add?
I would just like to, did everyone enjoy the book? What were your thoughts on the book? Did you know?
It was very interesting.
Okay.
And I particularly like the fact that when Yeadon Swim Club defaulted on their taxes and closed, that Jacqueline Purefoy Brinkley, do I have this correct, spearheaded the movement to purchase the Yeadon Swim Club, so that if it was not going to be integrated, no one was going to swim there. And I think that's justice.
Yes.
And you do a fabulous job, Anthony, and Bob did a fabulous job reading the book. It was quite readable.
Yes.
Thank you.
And looking forward to seeing some of your other upcoming projects, Bob, that you have coming up too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to get, I think, back into Tuskegee a little bit and do some things with that, and I'll keep you posted. And, and I think, the story of the Nile, in part, it wards us against complacency, right? Because there is that history, but we're living in a moment in time where there are a lot of people who would prefer exclusiveness and prefer, all of these things. And so it's important not only to talk about it, but, to maintain that kind of inclusivity that the Nile and Anthony and the other leaders there, are doing, and that your church is doing. I mean, it's really, really important. Complacency is not a good thing. And we need to ward against it.
And those are important words in this election year.
Right.
To keep in mind.
I just like to say thank you so much for your kind words. And I just thank you for opening up your church to let our story be told, because getting our story out is just so important. My father and mother and several of others who knocked on doors to raise money for the land to purchase, to build the pool. And then makes me so proud to see my former students take such leadership roles in at the NILE Swim Club, and to keep our doors open to this day just makes me so proud of them.
Thank you so much, Denise, for being here, and the other board members who are here. It means a lot to us to have all of you, and Bob and Anthony here as well tonight to share all this with us, and all the important work that all of you are doing. And I want to extend an invitation to all of you who are not regular members of the book group too, separate from tonight's conversation, to know that our book group is also an inclusive space, not just for members of the church. We have people who are not church members, and people who don't even live in the state of Pennsylvania to join us through Zoom, since we use the Zoom platform exclusively now to meet. You're all welcome at any time. If you want to be on the email distribution list, let me know. You can pick and choose some of the books that may or may not be of interest to you, and just join us. We have a good core group of people that love to read, love to get together, and love to be in community. And we'd love to have you join us. The book that Bob referenced, we did read that. I don't know that we read it as a book group. I can't remember if we read it as a church conversation, but many of the folks that are here tonight did read that book. And having your book, Bob, to piggyback on that conversation was really important and special for us too.
Cool. And next summer you can all read your books at the NILE.
Yeah, but it looks like we're all going to be able to go over there and recommune there, so that'll be great.
And your book's at the library, because I got it there.
Thank you.
Excellent. So I think what I'm going to do now, we typically are very good at respecting everyone's time and evening. When we meet, we always try to end right around 8 o'clock, and it looks like we're getting right at that time. So I'm going to be respectful of the time that you spent here, and just very appreciative. Thanks again, Bob and Anthony, for joining us, and the rest of the board members who are here, and those of you who are visiting, and my core group of book group folks. You rock. So it's all nice to have everybody tonight, and I wish you all a good rest of the evening and a good week ahead. So
thank you, Rona, for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rona, Anthony, and Robert.
Rona.
Thank you,
Robert.
Anthony.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing you at the
everyone.
NILE Swim Club next summer.
Yeah, we'll see
All
you.
right.
We'll see you all at the NILE, right?
That's
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Good to know, yeah.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Bye.
Harry, thanks for the
Good
tag.
seeing you again.
Not a problem. I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.